Later here as a part of Professor Krishnamurthy Memorial Lecture. So, speaking about few words about him. Professor Krishnamurthy was a distinguished textile expert who studied at Manchester College of Technology and later served at Srikantaiah Silver Jubilee Technological Institute. Rising from lecturer to principal, he dedicated his life to advancing textile education and even after retirement, continued guiding small-scale silk enterprises in Bengaluru. So here, for our additional happiness, his family members are gathered here. So I'm welcoming you all. A hearty welcome to this session. And as a part of this present Srikantaiah Memorial Lecture, we are privileged to have Dr. Vishwanath Srikantaiah, sir.
I'm just plain Vishwanath. I'm not a doctor, so I don't want that correction.
Vishwanath, sir, a water activist, urban planner, and popularly or widely known as Rain Man of Bengaluru. So I would like to invite a warm welcome to the session, and I'm giving you
the floor.
Yeah.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be invited to IMB, and thanks for getting me here, and thanks to the family for seeing it fit that I should be talking on this particular memorial lecture. Sir MB is, of course, held in personally as a civil engineer too, but also as a Kannadiga and somebody from Mysore state and somebody from Karnataka in really high esteem. And it's always a pleasure to be there as part of Professor Krishnamurthy, who is also related to Sir MB, and therefore the whole family that is here is a great honor and privilege. And one always waits for an opportunity to say that I want to address an August gathering. And because it's August, so it's appropriate, because generally you make these kind of talks at May and April, which is slightly inappropriate, but thanks August gathering. And I hope to take you through a brief personal kind of intellectual journey, but also a bit of a practical journey to the issue of water and Bangalore. And one writes that Professor Krishnamurthy was greatly affectionately in love with the city, and he considered Bangalore as something that he cherished, and he was astonished at it growing from a pensioner's paradise to what is now a megalopolis, slightly dysfunctional megalopolis. So as a Mysorean from Vidyaranyapura and as a Bangalorean from Vidyaranyapura, it's also my it's been a sort of a personal journey to get into the water situation of Bangalore city, to examine it also professionally and be a bit of an advisor to the Bangalore Water Supply Sewerage Board and the government of Karnataka at points of time, teach about it in the Azim Premji University, and work with communities in trying to solve some of the community level problems related to water. And so that becomes the journey here. And so I think I'll just sort of sit down so that it's available and take you through this brief passage of time. So in a strange way, for me, the exploration has been that geology is destiny. So it's a very politically loaded word, but geology is destiny at a country scale and at a city scale. Particularly for Bangalore, what you figure out is that a ridge line runs through it. For most cities, they take great pride that a river runs through it. But in this case, a ridge line runs through it, and the only river was a non-perennial stream called the Vrishbhavati, which is now the Vishabhavati, with all the sewage in it. But we didn't have a perennial river. We didn't have it, but we had 920 meters above sea level as an advantage for us. And that's the geology. And one of what the map shows are the three major valleys of Bangalore, which determine how water flows in the city once it falls on rain, but also that doesn't flow, which causes waterlogging and flooding together. But from a geological perspective, it always is fascinating that a 6th standard education in geography still keeps one going in terms of understanding water. So the continental drift, the sinking of the Indo-Gangetic plain, and this is one is talking at an all India level. So while the Himalayas rose, and they are the youngest mountains, we know about it, we've studied about it, they cause the monsoon winds to occur, and the monsoon winds bring all the rain that India gets. June to September, the 4 months, deposit 75% of the rain or water that the Indian continent has. And as for India and as for Bangalore, there's a slight bit of a variance. this water is what we need to store for the rest of the 8 months for it to become available to us for human use. And that's the basic problem. We need it for agriculture, we need it for urban areas, we need it for domestic consumption, and we need it for industrial use. And where do we store the water? We store the water in our forests, old growth forests. We store it in soil moisture. We store it in aquifers, and we use it. And so this disruption of storage and usage and a balance between them is always the big challenge for the country as a whole, but also for the city in particular. And so what's fascinating about the Indian subcontinent also is that when the Shivaliks and the Himalayas rose, that particular part, which is what we call the Indo-Gangetic Plains, sank. And the monsoon winds and the rains brought all the silt from the Shivaliks and the Himalayas and deposited it in that blue patch, which goes all the way to Bangladesh here, and that's the Indus Valley, which goes to Karachi. And this particular tract of land with the soil and clay over millennia is perhaps the most fertile and fecund part of the world. And as you see from this population map, no wonder India is the country with the largest population. But within India, if you take a look at it, those blocks are in the Indo-Gangetic Plain. The densest part next only to that of China and the Yellow River component of it. But this fecundity, as it urbanizes, as the lifespan of citizens grow due to better health and better water and better sanitation, becomes a challenge for a nation to manage. One of those pillars, which is not in the Indo-Gangetic Plain, is in the south, and it's in the city of Bangalore. The 14.5 million people who occupy it, and pretty soon in the next 30 years, if we're all optimistic, about 50 million of us, 50 million, we'll have to learn to manage. And can we manage with the transport, with the garbage, but dominantly with water? Because we can live with garbage, we can live with traffic jams. It can take us 2.5 hours, 5 hours, but we cannot live without water. So therefore, that's the big challenge. Is this growing city sufficient for water? Will it be sufficient in the future? What can we learn from the past, and what do we need to do in the future for it to at least give the bare minimum? And just as a number which I want to throw, the other advantage with India is that though it's 1/3 the land mass of USA and China, but in terms of arable land, agricultural cultivable land, it's more or less the same. One of the reasons why this arability of the land has come is also because of the Indo-Gangetic Plain. No wonder, but also it has come at the cost of forests and jungles, right? And so we have converted forests to agricultural land. And so one of the first environmental disasters at scale can be blamed on agriculture. Settled agriculture is a destroyer of natural resources and forests. So when we zoom in from this geological destiny to Bangalore, we're lucky when we go to Lal Bagh to see rocks which are 3,000 million years old, right? And these rocks, which lifted themselves up to 920 meters above sea level, is the base platform on which the city grows. And this base platform has weathered some places up to 20 feet, some places up to 100 feet. And in that weathered lateritic kind of a soil lies water, which is held as groundwater and which becomes available to us. In the hard rock itself, we drill to 1,800 feet to get water, but that hard rock water is scarce, limited, is generally of bad quality, and quickly runs out. So there are two aquifers that we have, and I'll come a bit to that, but that's what it does. But what this peninsular gneiss also has done to Bangalore is lifted it up to 920 meters above sea level and caused the rainfall pattern, which is reasonably well distributed. Unlike the rest of peninsular India, when it's sweltering in April and May, the hot, loose summer winds are blowing. In Bangalore, you generally have the April and May showers, in the evening showers, right? So that this well-distributed rainfall, is it an advantage that we can tap into to make our city livable, is a question that our forefathers asked. And so therefore, they started to modify the landscape to what's called the Kere Bavi system, or the tank and well ecosystem, the Keres and the Bavis. And what was done, if you note the landscape itself, this was supposed to be the land of 1,000 lakes, the city and its surrounds. Not just lakes, Kente, Katte, and Keres, right, and Kuntes. So the kuntes was for cattle, the keres was for agriculture, and the kattes was for small work there. So this is a landscape dotted with water bodies, all artificially created, for which we have a history. There are researchers who are looking at the inscription stones, and the inscription stones are dating some of these keres to 1,200-year history, right? So it was even predating Kempe Gowda. So the so-called founder of Bangalore, even before Kempe Gowda came in, there were people who had built keres, and the Cholas had come, the Gangas were there, and they had built all these things, and they left inscription stones to tell us about their history. And it was a simple act of putting a small earthen bund across a valley. So clouds came to the hills, cascaded as water, rain, and then it came, and then you put in an earthen bund. And on the earthen bund, you lined it with stones and you held on to the water. And so the characteristic was that this water was above ground, not generally below ground as is what lakes are imagined, because they're on valleys generally. And so therefore there's a bit of scooping of the earth, but majority of the water was held above the ground. And the bund was what was holding it back. The bund had what was called a waste weir or an overflow weir, a kodi in Kannada. And the kodi, as you can see here, was generally stronger because it had to overflow. And the whole system was described as a catchment where the rain fell, kaluways or channels which brought water to the kere. The kere holds the water. If it overflows, it goes via the kodi. And when the kere holds the water through the tubu or the sluice gate, you distribute the water in the achukattu or the command area and you grow paddy. And so this is the kodi. And what we famously call the Rajakalways of Bangalore are actually the Kodi Kalways. They are generally, the misnomer has come and everybody refers to Rajakalways as so there are some great channels which take water and which are deliberately constructed. Not so. These were Kodi Kalways, which were overflow weirs. And this overflow weir usually overflowed only twice or thrice in 10-year times. And they had cycles. And this took the water from one tank to the next tank through the valley itself. Nothing great about it. If it spilled over, it went to the paddy fields. And so there was no problem at all because paddy could tolerate the water logging for 3 to 4 days. So there's no problem at all. But once you urbanize, then you have a problem, right? And so this was the Kere and Bavi landscape of Bangalore, which you had with fishing activities there. And then this modified human landscape was a feudal construct. This was pre-democracy time, so there was a great deal of forced labor, but also communities which originated, started to develop around it. The Nirugantis, for example, were responsible for the distribution of water in the command area. And so the farmer had simply to come and plant the paddy, and they would say that they would then come the second time to harvest the paddy. The distribution of water was not in the farmer's hand, it was with the Nirugantis, and the Nirugantis would make sure that every field had water. So there was a societal construct around it, and the Nirugantis were paid as rice paddy, which they had harvested or cultivated. And when the Kodi overflowed, there was a festival to Gangamma, the local water deity, for the tank or kere, and Gangamma meant that every family in the village contributed grains, goats, sheep, and therefore there was a village festival and things were shared. So it's a cultural construct. What was remarkable also, this was a land of paddy. Paddy's got a bad rep these days as a water guzzling crop. Everybody wants to shift to millet and eat millets. But paddy is one of the best converters of physical water to virtual water. Though it takes 3,000 liters of water to make 1 kg of paddy roughly, but paddy can be stored for 3 years. Water cannot be stored. The sun is the enemy of water. The sun evaporates the water. Most tanks would dry up in the year. They would have water for only 3 to 6 months. The sun is the biggest enemy of water, as was written in the place, because it's of its evaporated force. So therefore, you convert it into virtual water, and paddy was the crop of choice, right? And it was also gender-driven in the sense most of the work of the paddy field was done by women. And so if you go to Kolar now, you would see the Bangalore of 200 years back. If you go about 80 kilometers to 100 kilometers to Mulbagal, you'd see this rocky landscape with great paddy. You don't have to go to Bali. You can go to Mulbagal and you can see rice terraces, right? Even now. And there is the seasonality to it. There are crops. Typically, one crop is what you would get from a kere. But if you designed the kere well and if the rainfall were good, you would get 2 crops and sometimes 3 crops. So it depends on the seasonality of the rain, and then you would get these 3 crops of rice paddy there. And you needed, in the rice paddy field, you'll see that you needed dry land also for the paddy to be threshed, right? So it was not that you wanted everything to be submerged and wet, you needed dry land. And then you see the well also there that is full. And this became important because when you flooded the paddy fields, you also recharged the shallow aquifer. And so typically paddy fields would go from one kere to the next kere, and all the submerged land would also recharge the aquifer so that when the kere dried up, the bavi had water for you to tide over the dry days and the summer days and the droughts, right? So this was important. And now this is the 80 feet or 100 feet of shallow aquifer where you hit hard rock, where you then dug these beautiful old open wells, right? So groundwater was the bavi. This too was by a community called the Kalluvaddars, who specialized in cutting stone, and the Manuvaddars who dug the earth to, and then both of them got together to line dry stone masonry to get water for yourself. And they had the architecture of the bavi. So not the glorious Gujarat step wells or Rajasthan step wells, but more prosaic, more democratic, more in the farmer's field kind of wells, equally beautiful structures without any cement or lime, right? So this was the tradition of water management in the city. And it provided in a strange way drinking water security because you would locate the well close to the kere. The water would go into the aquifer, and when the kere dried up, the bavi had water for a long time, depending on the depth of the bavi and how much water you would draw from it, right? So this is the concept. Now here, one thing to remember is that water is a common pool resource. It's not a state resource, it's not a private resource, it's a common pool resource for the community to manage the tank and the bavi and to take the waters. There were caste considerations there. It was not all benign. Bavis were designated for particular castes and so on and so forth, but still groundwater was a common pool resource. And that's now transformed itself. And one other beautiful artifact in this part of the world, and when I go to Sarembi's farm in Chikballapur, you see the bavis there. There's a beautiful step well. There are two small wells, the bavis themselves, which are now, of course, dry because the landscape is a bit dry. But as you go on the way to the farm, you see something called the Silendra. The Silendra is a beautiful construct of this part of the world. This is the Silendra. Granite blocks, 4 blocks put together with a small hole and a string stuck to the hole as a spigot. You take it out and you drink water. And this is usually placed next to that kind of a vertical, horizontal stone. That's where you put your head load. Sit, drink the water. Below the shade of a tree, there's a shrine. You can eat, generally on pilgrim routes. Put the head load back on your head because if there's nobody around, if it's a very heavy thing, you need to shift it, but then you shift it and then there's water. And it was an act of the faith of the community to fill these cylinders with water because it was an act of piety. Nobody asked you to do it. You did it because it got you punya. It got you an RAC in heaven. You may get a confirmed birth if the TT was willing and your punyas were adding up all that, right? But the cylinders were part and parcel of the landscape, unfortunately disappearing very fast. This was the equivalent of the pyaus in North India, what you had here. And so perhaps as a tradition, we need to revisit this heritage and work on it. But one of the points that one wants to make is that water in itself has no great value. Water is with what water does. And so therefore you have something called social hydrology. And this is the way to look at water as to how the benefits of water are delivering justice, equity, and access. Is it universally available? Is it available to all? And does it draw benefits for them? And just to give you a crude example, some of the work that we do with lakes and tanks, you desilt a tank with a JCB and a tractor, you take the silt out, a lot of rain comes and the tank is full of water. Who benefits? When you ask the question, who benefits, you figure that those who have land in the command area benefits the most from the water. And if you don't have land, what does water mean to you? Nothing. Water has no meaning at all. So water can actually increase inequities if not designed to deliver justice and equity. So from a policy perspective, those who are grappling with it, the policy goal is not merely the functional availability of water, it's the usufructory rights to water which should be accessible to the weakest in the society. That should be the goal that we do it. So in a sense, with environmental romanticism, sometimes we forget the social injustices that water has caused in the past and the necessity to make it more regular and pakka here. And so therefore, when you revive a tank or a water body, you ask the question, who should revive it? What should be the process of revival? How should you ensure that water is available to those who don't have land? So in some simple ways, for example, Dalit families usually have a goat and sheep. So 1/3 of the water of the tank can be reserved for goat and sheep through the summer months so that the water is available to those who have livestock. Or the fishing rights of the water can be given to those who don't own land, and so therefore they have access to a means of livelihood as well as nutrition and proteins from it, right? But this has to be carefully crafted by the institution managing the revival. Remember, the tank now is in a democratic Gram Panchayat-based ecosystem. It's no longer the feudal construct. So therefore, the way we do the process of revival of water is as important as the final finished product. And so therefore, this is an example from a tank or a lake, but this is a question you have to ask yourself at a metropolitan scale. At a city scale itself, the usual cry is that Bangalore is running out of water. Therefore, let's build a dam on the Kaveri. Let's drown 5,000 hectares of the wildlife sanctuary. Let's bring more water. But then the question that one has to also ask is, who will this water reach and who will it benefit, right? And is there actually a scarcity of the resource, or is there a distributive justice scarcity? Is it the network needs to expand to cover everybody and get universal coverage, or should you put more water in a leaking, dysfunctional pipe? And these are sort of stark choices that policymakers have. One of the dominant impact on water systems in Mysore state especially was this particular drought from 1876, 77, 78. And there are records to show that about 90,000 people died in the city of Bangalore alone because they had come here for food. Kingdom of Mysore, maybe 12.5 lakh people, that is 25% of the population of Mysore kingdom, would have died for want of food and water. So all the glorious 1,000 tanks of Bangalore could not support a population of 1.5 lakh people, just 1.5 lakh people, because there was continuous failure of rain for 3 years. So therefore, when we eulogize the tank and demand its restoration, we must also recognize its limitation. And remember that that water was where people went to the water, and perhaps was about 20 to 25 liters per person per day. We talk about 135 liters per capita per day now. And so there are these historical serendipities, which Saramvi was also part of as part of the history. And one of the reasons for Bangalore city itself and why Bangalore city has water is because of gold. And if we had not found gold in KGF, we would not have had water in Bangalore. And it's a very strange coincidence because in 1888, you actually started the mining operations in KGF. And at that point of time, remember that the Champion Reef and the mines of KGF were the deepest mines in the world. Once you hit about 100 feet, the mine started to get flooded with groundwater. And you had only steam engines to remove the water out. And the steam engines used firewood at that point of time and coal, bad quality coal. And they could only be effective at about 200 feet, 250 feet. You couldn't lift water out. The extent of water coming into the mines at KGF was 5 million liters per day. So therefore, the operations of KGF, which was one of the biggest revenue exchequer for the state, demanded modern technology and hydroelectricity. And so therefore, the first plant, the hydroelectric plant of scale, was Shivanasamudram. Devan Sheshadri Iyer, Lord Benier, and others who put this up. The first line from Shivanasamudram goes to KGF. The other line goes to the Maharaja's Palace, then the other line finally comes to Bangalore. But it goes to KGF, and it goes to KGF to remove water from the mine so that the miners could go deep and mine more gold. Now, Shivanasamudram and the mines operation start, and there's a lot of gold being extracted. But in summer months, the Kaveri flows is not enough to generate the electricity needed for KGF. And therefore, the cry goes up that we want more regular power, for which there must be regular flows in the river. Therefore, we need a dam. And so therefore, the origin of the KRS dam, Saramvi's brainchild, lies in regulating the flows of the Kaveri so that power could go to KGF. And the need of the dam is actually hydroelectricity. But once you're starting to build the dam, then you build it for irrigation and other purposes. But it starts with the gold in KGF. Yeah. And then remember that later on, as things go along, the KRS becomes the store for the Kaveri, which then allows regulated flows to come down the Kaveri, and we then draw it from Thorekadinhalli and are able to pump, currently designed for 2,250 million liters per day. Without the KRS dam, there would be no water. Without the KRS dam, there would be no electricity, and without that electricity, we wouldn't be able to pump water to our city. So gold is at the heart of Bangalore's growth. Later on follows IISc, later on follows the public sector units and all. But without water, you can't survive. Remember, 90,000 people had died. So this got sort of historical serendipities around water, or something to remember and to think about, and we work apart. So in 1894, we start with steam engines to pump water to the city because the tanks and lakes are not good enough, and we go to Hesarghatta and use engines from Manchester, where Professor Krishnamurthy had gone to study. But we bring engines and pumps and motors from Manchester, we put them in Hesarghatta, and we pump the water to keep the city going. 255,000 population is the estimated population, 55 liters per capita per day kind of thing. So technology is going on in its own strange way. So the city actually has just 3 taps and 4 drums to manage itself. The 3 taps are pipe water supply, which comes from the Kaveri in this particular case. The second tap is rainwater, which is slightly underutilized. And the third tap is treated wastewater. Cities or urban areas are non-consumptive users of water. Unlike agriculture, where you put water to a sugarcane field or a paddy field and it evaporates or evapotranspires in the plant growth, in a city, you have a bath, you wash your clothes, you do the dishes, you flush the toilet, the water comes back as used water. We have the technologies now to pick up that used water, clean it, and then recycle it and reuse it, right? We have the technologies. And there's one other point that I wanted to make to the policymakers and others, just as a matter of thought, is if we capture the true ecological cost of water. And what's the ecological cost of water? It's the cost of water when you return it to nature at the same quantity and quality at which you appropriated it. I take 100 liters of fresh water from the Kaveri, I return back to the Kaveri 100 liters of equally clean water at the same spot that I took it. It cost me 95 rupees 1,000 liters. I have the technologies for it. I have the money. If I choose to, I have the monies for it, because this is a city of billions of dollars being generated as economic revenue. If we do that, if we capture the true price for water and return it back to nature in the same quantity and quality, think of what happens. There's no scarcity of resource. This is the neoliberal golden dream, which is there. But there is no pollution. All our rivers and lakes and carriers and wells are all clean because we've picked up all the wastewater and we have treated it before we release it to the environment. So as a goal for policy, one would say that we should work towards capturing the true value of water and generate the resources to invest in it so that we don't have any problem of pollution. And if we free up our city from pollution, there's enough and more fresh water available locally for it to be used productively, and then we can focus on the distributed justice. So that's one of the points, and these are the 3 taps and 4 stores that we have where we store water, and that's demand management. Because we can't have unlimited consumption of a resource, we need demand management, but we need water as a human right, distributive justice first, so that everybody has access to it, and then we have economic good kicking in or demand management to come in. In the process, the city has built a set of institutions to manage water, all of them 20th century, except for one, which is 21st century, the Karnataka State Natural Disaster Monitoring Center. You can call it a 21st century institution. Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board, created in 1964, was the first parastatal in India. So we realized, and the governance realized, that we needed specialized institutions capable of delivering water and managing sanitation, and we created it. It became a model for others. The question to ask now is, do we need 21st century institutions? Do we need more well-rounded institutions? And what kind of institutions should govern our water? Is the 20th century institution of supply only enough? Yeah, so we need to do that. And we remember some incidences like later on Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri coming in 1964 and inaugurating the Integrated Urban Water Management Plan, which was the first time a state government had persuaded the Planning Commission to invest 20 crore rupees for a water supply project. No other city had been capable of doing that. Bangalore did it. And so there was this concentrated governance approach to try and create institutions, but also to try and bring in monies needed for these kind of operations to occur, right? So there are these firsts. And so the first tap is the river Kaveri from which we get water. And one of the things to remember is many a time we think that a city is a net usurper of water from a river. That this water should actually go to rural areas or go to agriculture. That city does not deserve water. And the metaphor used was that of Bakasura recently, right? But then the question that one can ask is the citizen of Bangalore not entitled to a human right to water? Because I'm part of the river basin, am I entitled to some water from the Kaveri because I'm part of the Kaveri basin? Yeah. And is my entitlement of 135 liters per capita per day any lesser from the 2 crore per hectare that sugarcane farmer needs? And how do you then balance it? A slum dweller in Devarjivanhalli who needs 135 liters per capita per day, a rich farmer in Mandya, just to contrast, who needs 2 crore liters for 1 hectare of sugarcane, and the sugar grown from that sugarcane causes diabetes, or it then is translated to alcohol, which has several problems. What then is the right or the justice between these two sets of demand, and is there a difference at all, and should we differentiate? So my argument is that a city has equal right to the water as much as any citizen in the river basin, including the rural people, and water for life precedes water for livelihoods, but both go hand in hand. So life, livelihoods, and then commercial use of water. That should be the hierarchy of needs that we go through. And let's remember, Bangalore city supports 40% of the population of Karnataka in the Kaveri basin, 40 to 50%. And takes currently 11% of Karnataka's allocation of waters. With just 11% of Karnataka's allocation of waters, you support 40% of the population, but you also support 60% of the GDP. And if Bangalore gets responsible with its wastewater, makes sure that it is treated and does not pollute, and then is given to farmers, as we will come to that, in that sense, Bangalore just becomes a pit stop for the Kaveri water on its journey from the river to the farmers' fields. And we'll come to that particular portion. And so I would argue that urbanization and metropolitization actually gives us an opportunity to solve the water problem instead of actually creating it. Because of the fiscal muscle, the governance muscle, the technological muscle, added with social insights, if we are able to bring that together, then we have perhaps solutions for our water crisis. And so therefore, we are monitoring these reservoirs. 4, 5, 6, 7 become critical to us in Bangalore. Harangi, Hemavati, KRS, and Kabini, these big 4 reservoirs, which are at play to get water to the city. And as we speak today, this is an old figure, all of them are overflowing. And this is August, nearly September. So remember, we need 30 TMC of water, 30,000 million cubic feet of water, and the storage capacity of these reservoirs is roughly 114.57, right? So it's not significant, but then we don't have a right to it. It depends on the mercy of the Water Resource Department to release the water into the river, and from there to be picked up by the BWSS. We need some formalization and recognition of the urban right to water also in the basin level. There's a huge dependency on groundwater, and groundwater is 800 million liters, is the latest report from IISc, 500,000 borewells, which have gone to a depth of 1,800 feet. Now, borewells and groundwater has been Wild West terrain. There's been no state control. Anybody who can drill a borewell is allowed to drill one, and some would argue luckily, because if the state had intervened, you would have created a crisis. But because it's in private domain, it's allowed the economic engine to function and water to be given to everybody. And here's one particular challenge with the borewell. Suppose the state does not give you water. You built a house or an apartment in the periphery of the city, and the BWSSB is not giving you water. Can it prevent you from drilling a borewell? One would argue that it's your right to life, and therefore you would drill that borewell for your right to life, and you would go ahead with it. But if the state gives you water, then it may have some legitimacy in controlling your exploitation of groundwater. The question then is, how often should the state give you water? Is once in a week enough? 1 hour in a week, is it enough? Or should it be 24/7? And what should be the quality of water that the state delivers to you? Should it be a minimum quantity? And then can the state control your right to life and livelihood with borewell? So this is a complex part of the policy and the lawmaking, which causes problems. And of course, then there is the paradox of flooding and waterlogging and scarcity. So the second tab here, not the third tab, is the rainwater harvesting. So what has the state done as part of policy? It's made a law mandating rainwater harvesting for every house and every building. And the law is also very technical. It says 60 liters of storage per square meter based on the rainfall pattern and 30 liters per square meter of paved area. So it encourages unpaved area. It encourages you to store water. And ideally, if every citizen in Bangalore were to do rainwater harvesting, there would be no flooding, there would be no groundwater shortage. But we live in ideal worlds. The question to ask is, why is rainwater harvesting not being implemented the way it should be, and why is there no citizen uptake at scale? Yeah. And so these are simple things. Many people are doing it, storing rainwater in rain barrels and using it as a supplement to water. One of the other things is now groundwater management, and there we are going something called shallow aquifer. So we're differentiating between the deep bore wells and the shallow open wells, because the shallow wells can be refilled more easily as compared to the deep bore wells. So can we bring that shallow aquifer to play? And so one of the set of solutions is to revisit the old dug wells of Bangalore, which was dotted with dug wells. Years of muck has jummified there. Take it out, the well digging community takes it out, and then you bring it into play as a community asset, free water for people to take, essentially for non-potable purpose. So there's a 1 HP motor and there's an overhead tank, and usually it's done very informally by the community paying for it or the government paying for it or so on and so forth. So many wells are now being rejuvenated because the wells are getting revived as the lakes are getting revived. So if you regenerate lakes, the wells get revived. And so then you turn this community asset back, you decorate it, you make it part of the community feature so that they don't dump garbage, so that people don't dump garbage into it. And there is some sort of respect and reverence to it, right? And so this revived dug well on the way to Bangalore Airport, for example, provides 1 lakh liters to the town municipal council. It's part of the distribution network, and it gives you that extra water merely because the lake upstream has been revived and the shallow aquifer is functional. And here, when you talk to the women, they come out with some incredible lessons. So this lady there, she said, don't put a pump to this well. Please clean it up, put 2 pulleys, don't put a pump. If you put pump, the water will go to these hotels, restaurants, and apartments. The well will dry up, we will have no water. If we take 4 bindiges of water, go to the well and draw 4 bindiges of water, 75 families here, we'll all go, take only 4 bindiges. We know that the well will have water throughout summer. Don't put a motor. So demand management, resource availability, living within means, all comes when you consult the community and you listen to the wise words of women, because they're the bearers of water. Now, the question is this drudgery or is this choice? And is the choice a forced choice, or is it a democratic free will exercise? But for the moment, suboptimally, you respect the women's words, and this well was cleaned up and 2 pulleys put and disinfected. And in the crisis of 2023, when for 181 days Bangalore didn't get any rain, this well had water at 10 feet. And it had potable water. The other argument that they put was, takes me 5 rupees for 20 liters of RO water. This well water, we know for a century, is as good as RO water. 4 bindiges is 20 rupees saved in a day. In a month, 600 rupees saved. For me, 600 rupees saved in a month is the most important thing for them was that we go out to work. When we go back home, we should be mentally secure that there is water for us to have a bath, to do the dishes, to bathe our child, to give it to the cow. That mental water security piece that we have when we know that there's a well waiting for us with water is much more than any monies or valorization that you can do. Now, this is again a community asset. Water is being revived as a community asset. And the question is, can we keep the 10,000 wells of Bangalore full of good, clean water for the community to choose when to use it? We're doing a lot of investment in private water supply, Jal Jeevan Mission, get a tap to every house, 55 liters per capita per day. We haven't focused enough on the community aspect component of it. We should do both. Water should be available at the doorstep, 55 liters, no doubt about it. Good, clean water, drinking water. But also the well should be available when we need it as an emergency and for other uses, right? So what do we do at a gated community level? So we need units of intervention where there's an institution at play and a legal framework at play from a policy perspective. Institutional oversight and legal oversight is essential for good governance to kick in. Without both, good governance doesn't kick in. For us, the ideal 73rd, 74th Amendment can play itself out in so many words, but actually what works is the residents association. Now it's a gated community, it's a rich community, it's a homogeneous community. What would have happened? 360 sites here, every one of them would have drilled a borewell. A borewell goes to about 1,000 feet there, costs 4 lakh rupees. 360 into 4 is 14.4 crore rupees. 14.4 crore rupees, 360 straws, same glass tumbler, each competing with the other. Pretty soon, all of them dry and the glass empty. So competitive drilling is a race to the bottom, literally, financially. How do you reverse it? Well, what you do is you say, hey, no private borewells. Only 3 community borewells we will drill. Now, 14.4 crores, 1.12 lakhs. Now, you're down to 12 lakhs. You're saving money. With the money saved, you'll put a distribution network, a meter, make sure that every family gets its fair share of water, whatever the 3 borewell gets. You'll price the water so that if you consume more than 25,000 liters a month, you will pay 120 rupees a kiloliter. That money goes to your own association. It doesn't go to a private player or to the state or any place. It goes to your association. You'll collect the money and invest it in a sewage treatment plant. You'll make sure the treated sewage is of high quality, that there's no pollution there, and you'll give the treated wastewater to every household free for your garden use and non-potable use, so that your freshwater demand comes down further. Once you communitize an asset, what you then find is that the borewell water actually starts to rise and that there is enough water for the entire community. Now, this is the challenge for us at a city scale, at a national scale. How do we create the institutional framework and the legal framework and the good behavior to treat groundwater as a sustainable resource? And that's the groundwater challenge from a perspective. So this is what happened there. This is one gated community. There are other gated communities which are working on it. And so we do the maths also. So it's you need to figure out what the rainfall is, what the lowest rainfall is, and how do you balance the water demand. And so then again, with the revival of lakes, the question that we ask in our city is, what is that end goal of a revived lake? Is it a performative use where you go around walking, cycling, jogging? Is it recreational? Is it aesthetic? Or is it livelihood based? Is it livelihoods for the fisher folk or for the grass cutters? Is it biodiversity, flood control, recharge? It could be a combination of all, but sometimes some of them are in conflict with each other. The performative or the aesthetic could be in conflict with the ecological. You may not want to do boating or motorboating in a place because the bird biodiversity is high. And so those choices have to be made, and who makes the choice becomes a critical component of it. So I'll give you one example, which is Jagkur Lake in the north, one of the lakes. And so what happened here is that the BWSSB set up a 15 million liter per day wastewater treatment plant. Treated wastewater comes in through this constructed wetland to the lake. And so that's the treated wastewater treatment plant. Now, there's a very interesting thing happening here. The wastewater treatment plant is funded by the power plant at Yelahanka, completely funded by the power plant at Yelahanka. It gives you the capital money and it gives the BWSSB the O&M cost, the operations and maintenance cost to run it. It takes 13 million liters of water for itself and it gives 4 million liters for the lake. So this kind of partnerships between commercial and community-based infrastructure has also to start to kick in. The sludge is taken 300 kilometers by farmers and used in areca and coconut fields. It's free of heavy metals. It's good to be used. The wetlands, as part of the design, and it's been remodeled again, becomes a biodiversity spot. It polishes the water. The fishers have to be involved as part of the cleaning and the maintenance of the lake because of their livelihoods that they have. And they are the important key stakeholders, not just the middle class who run around or walk around the lake, right? And therefore, you need to integrate livelihoods of fisherfolk, biodiversity all together with treated wastewater, and you recognize that there is grass to be cut, there is kitchen garden herbs to be taken from the lake. All these are part of the lake's design and activities. And then the birds can come back and the birds can get their Aadhaar card and electoral card and then are willing to vote in the local elections because they no longer are migrants. They now are part of the city's fabric. And we welcome these kind of migrants as much as we do the other human migrants too. And then there is an aquifer rejuvenation because treated wastewater has now become groundwater. Without the yuck factor, you can take water from the well, treat it, and use it for drinking purposes. So what the city needs and what the city is trying to do and struggling to do it, because there's so much of sewage flowing in the environment and solid waste there, is to transform wastewater as a livelihood resource, as an ecological resource, and then as a functional resource. So how do you then scale it up? So the city is again doing a major experiment, the second largest of its kind in the world, next only to Mexico City, where every one of the sewage treatment plants in the city, there will be 61 of them, treating 2,000 million liters per day, will be used to pump and fill 1,000 lakes in Kolar, Chikballapur, Anekal. Already about 300 to 400 lakes are being filled. There are challenges there in terms of the quality of treatment, in terms of secondary contamination, in terms of farmers' perception and all that. But we have the technology to be able to deliver good quality water to fill the lakes. And this would then become the influence zone, because the new Bangalore is not within the boundaries of the BBMP. The new Bangalore is going to be Devanhalli, Tumkur, Magadi, all part of it. Eventually, 8,000 square kilometers. So we have now to start to worry about the water security of this region right now. And one of the ways that we can address the water security is by protecting all those lakes outside in the periphery and making sure that they're linked to rainwater and the catchments are clean to receive rainwater. And the years where they don't receive rainwater, they get high quality treated used water to keep them full, right? And so this is the plan now, 1,062 million liters, filling about more than 1,000 lakes, right? And it will increase because the demand for this treated wastewater increases. And so it's being transferred to a long distance, 100 to 120 kilometers, being pumped up to fill it. This is how the lakes are being filled. And the water is not being allowed to be used directly. It is allowed to recharge the aquifers, and the quality is being monitored so that it can then grow the vegetables. Now, here's the thing. If you do this well, the farmers have water security. About 64,000 farmers will have water security and therefore livelihood security. They'll be able to grow 365 days a year and 366 every leap year. And the food they grow will come back to the city, completing the circular economy, giving food security to this city, water security and livelihood security to farmers, plus biodiversity enhancement, if we do it well. So this is how these projects are rolling out. And so the future of Bangalore is also technologically driven, as was in the past. And technology is one imagination and one drive that is part of the DNA of the city, tempered with social justice frameworks, will be the way that India will address its metropolitan regions in the future. And so fisheries can exist, bird biodiversity can exist, open wells can be filled up, you can bring in drip irrigation to make sure that water is efficiently used and more products are grown. And so I'll end the story with the last imagination that we have with water. This is Devanhalli, where the international airport is located. The town is 45,000 people, and what you see as red dots are 110 deep bore wells, which is the only source of water for the town. They get water once in 10 days. Very saline water, salty water. If they have water for drinking, it has to come from RO plants, right? So what do you do there? The town then decides to revive its local lake next to the fort, which is from 1504. And so the lake is revived, and I'll show you some figures of that. This is how the lake was. That's Todkere, and this is the lake, absolutely dry for 17 years. Not a drop of water, not linked to the catchment. It was a Maidan, right? And so the lake was desilted with the town municipal council and with NGOs and funding from CSR. And this is how the lake looks like right now. So this is both rainwater and treated wastewater from the city of Bangalore. It's full throughout the year. That's how the well next to the lake was, full of garbage and a tree growing in it. That was cleaned up. That's how the well looks like now. There are turtles in it, swimming in it, and fish swimming in it. And then you set up a water treatment plant. You take the water from the well, clean it, make it potable, good enough as BIS 10500 drinking water standards, and you supply it to the town. And what you then get is really cost-effective water. It costs only 1 rupee 54 paisa for 1,000 liters of drinking water. 1 rupee 54 paisa. Plus, from a climate perspective, it requires 1/20th the energy from bore wells, and therefore 1/20th the carbon emissions. So therefore, it's climate resilient water, it's climate mitigating water. If you revive your local lake, local well, if you reuse treated wastewater and use rainwater wisely, and if you're able to scale it up, the opportunity then is there for every town to be water secure, right? And so this is what we need to figure on. And the policy nudges and other work that will happen is we have to think of what's called integrated urban water management, where the first form of integration, I'll just go to that. The two ideas and notions which are driving us is something called One Health, where we recognize that human health, animal health, and environment health are all tied together, and One Water, which means that all forms of water, the rainwater, treated wastewater, groundwater, is just one unit, and we need to make One Health and One Water talk from the inclusive lens. And I can't stress the point again that the first lens that we must use is social access, gender inclusiveness, participation, and recognizing the informal sector should be at the heart of how we design our hydrological systems. And then we can do the technical, institutional, financial, legal, and environmental systems to support that goal, which is universal access to water for life and livelihood from an urban and a regional perspective. So I'll leave you with the last slide. The overall goal is the imagination of the city as a water and fertilizer factory. not as a consumer of water, but a net producer of water, with one health, one water, and one community as the perspective. So thank you for your patient hearing on an afternoon, 2:30 to 3:30. This is all.
Because that was such an insightful talk regarding his experience about the his long-term engagement with the water crisis in Bengaluru. So it was an insightful talk. Thank you so much. And now it's open to you guys because you can ask question and now it's the time for the question and answer session.
Who built the Raju Kaluways? I have a number of questions.
The Raj Kalways?
Yeah.
They were built by the Niruganti community.
Not by the Malayals.
No.
Not by.
This is built by ordinary farmers.
They are long distance and connecting various lakes. So how can one community do that?
No, it's not really rocket science. It can be.
No, I mean effort, money, time. So unless one big organization gets into it, these Nirugantis are small people now.
So every kere has its own Kodi Kalwe and Raj Kalwe. And every kere is responsible for that Kodi Kalwe and Raj Kalwe. And if you come to Kolar now, you'll be able to better see it. And it's all done by the local community. And now, actually, women in the local community, they build the Raj Kalwes and the Kodi Kalwes.
Shilendra. How does the water go up to that level?
So you have correct. So you have a sloping slab of granite or small steps that people take water and fill it up. Yeah. It's not an overhead tank. It's at a ground level tank.
Okay, the supply by the state you suggested. I attended a talk in the Bangalore Business Center about 7, 8 years back, where the EDA said that to all the people who are going to buy flats north of Bakery Circle, we are not going to provide Kaveri water in future, now and any time. So just be clear. If the promoter tells you please buy the flat, we are telling you. So if the state is supposed to coordinate this, what happens is, for example, in Koramangala, I stay there, there's Kaveri, the chap comes and turns it off once every 2 days, turns it on and off. Now what happens is everyone builds a sump to store. So that much is wasted in everyone's sump, and then he pumps it. That's the disadvantage of that. Then the next is this RERA Act. Does it include this gated community single borewell thing? The big RERA Act.
Unfortunately.
Then Arakanat. I just another topic.
Can we just see if there are more questions from other people who have also been listening?
RO is banned by the WHO.
We'll answer that. It's not banned by the WHO. It's not recommended to drink RO water from a health perspective, right? So it's WHO is not an organization which can ban or not ban. But very interesting questions. So, but if there are others, most happy to take, and we can always discuss it.
Should we rethink urbanization?
I have a personal view.
Please answer.
I'll put my personal opinion there. There's no country in the world which has not urbanized, given the current economic paradigm, to the extent of 85% of its population staying in urban areas. No country in the world. There's no example. So we got to either face the reality of the fact that we will get urbanization, and therefore we should work very hard to make our cities livable, or we can live in the paradise that there will be this rural spread out population which will do well. So the choice is ours. That's my take.
I have a question. So like about 7, 8 years ago, this EC Valley project that sort of took over to try and sort of give life to, you also mentioned that in your slides. It sort of, do you think it sort of lived up to its promise? What I remember is that once the treated water started going to farming communities, it sort of got into this conversation of like dirty water, which is not fully clean, being sent to rural communities who are essentially being given bad water from Bangalore, and why do we have to deal with it, etc., etc. So, I mean, that's also a part of this, drive towards equity and water sustainability. This kind. I was just wondering, since you've been following the sector, what your story around that would be.
So it was true to a large extent because the minor irrigation department goofed up in the first set of water that was pumped from Belandur Lake. It actually pumped untreated water to the tank. And therefore, there was a case. The case went to the High Court. It went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court created an oversight committee. And thanks to the case and thanks to the committee, the whole system was cleaned up. And there was now attention on the treatment and what's the quality of water being pumped and all that. Now, one of the things is that we have the opportunity to design and communicate good things, or we can goof up at mega scale without any ownership, sense of ownership. So the BWSSB was responsible for the treatment of the wastewater. The lift irrigation was with the minor irrigation department. Once it landed in the lake, it belongs to the Zilla Panchayat. And once it gets to the aquifer, it's a farmer's problem. So it's a classic institutional niche problem without any ownership that created it. And the farmers were right that they got bad quality water, and they are genuinely concerned about the quality of water. Now, we don't have a mechanism or a system by which we open up communications, dialogue, and convince the farmer that we're doing a good job and that the water being supplied is good, right? So the state's inability to be a good communicator, to be nuanced in its arguments, not use a sledgehammer on a fly, is catastrophic. And so therefore, we have to build the 21st century institutions which are well-rounded. The opportunity is there. The farmers' fears are also genuine.
You said 1,000 lakes were there in Bangalore. Currently, how many lakes are surviving? And more importantly, there's so many lakes that have been filled up and apartments have been built. And they call it, half the lake is gone and they call it Lake View and so what is the current situation?
So we have 186 lakes, which are live lakes, as so-called, which have the potential to have water, of which 183 are with the BBMP, the Bangalore Mahanagarpalika, and there's an effort from the BBMP in investing a lot of money in cleaning up and retaining these lakes. As of yesterday, about 120 lakes had water to at least 50% or more. So better late than never, some realization has come and there's this effort. But it's a very difficult effort. Flooding is a problem. It's one of the challenges. Yeah. We're built in low-lying areas. But there's also a history to some of the lakes being filled up because malaria was a big challenge in the 60s and 70s. And various malaria committees actually suggested that the lakes, some of the tanks be filled up because they were breeding grounds for Anopheles.
But later it became a business proposal, I think.
A combination of everything, right? So even the state was filling it up to build bus stands and stadiums. So.
Thank you for the talk and the presentation. My question was around, who should be managing this? So, like you currently said, BBMP is in charge of most of the lakes. BWSSB needs to be providing the water. But in the Kere Bhavi system, obviously the community has to take charge and ownership. So, do you think we need new kind of legal frameworks or legal innovations to, kind of make somebody accountable for all?
Absolutely. So we have done a pathetic job with creating the Karnataka Tank Conservation Development Authority, which is in theory supposed to be designing and approving projects for lakes. The ownership of the land is with the revenue department and so on and so forth. So we have a mess, right? So we need to clean up our institutional and legal framework for especially urban water bodies.
Just follow-on question.
Yeah.
How would you define communities when it comes to Bhavi?
You can't. It's a fractious thing. There's no such thing as community. There are only entitled individuals right now. So the community is a very notional concept. It's a sociological trap. We can debate this later. So I'm being a bit sort of.
Once you create a Kere Bhavi system, who then gets access? Right? Is there some restriction on?
Correct.
You said it's a CPR, right? But then there should be some boundary around.
Correct. So therefore, what you need to do is to recognize these rights in the beginning and create what's the equivalent of a tank user group, which is in charge of the tanks with the Gram Panchayat as the legal base for their work. But most of them work on informal understandings. There's no formal recognition for many of these systems, which is a crying need. Yeah.
Point where he said there were different organizations in charge of this. I know that in Ahmedabad, they tried out one organization looking after.
And failed miserably.
That's what I wanted.
So the lakes are all in a bad shape. Didn't work. They've created a riverfront, which is a concrete front, and so it's a out and out disaster, but it's a model as a riverfront for the rest of India. But yeah. Yeah.
Small observation. Water of the gated communities are generally not metered. So the judicial use of water is not, encouraged, and he's penalized by paying, the average price. And the people who are, exorbitantly using the water, if they use most like that, me, I'm paying, let's say, leave the tap open. So.
So therefore, we need to create that institutional framework which takes responsibility for wise use of water and puts in this metering and pricing. As an institution, the community itself has to come together and decide on that. And we need a legal framework which allows the community to be able to take those decisions. If somebody says, no, I want to drill my private borewell, currently you can't be stopped. But if you want to make water sustainable, you need to make it a common pool resource, right? And the common pool resource, classic problem of tragedy of the commons. Yeah, so especially because in the apartments and gated communities, it plays itself. Sure.
Professor from GKVK said Arakanat is a water problem crossing.
Correct.
So you have to have 1:44
Yeah.
ratio. Has anyone taken the government to court for filling up Kempanbundi and making Majestic and Koramangala national teams?
Nobody has taken them to court. You can't take them to court. I mean, these are all fait accompli. So
They filled up, the government is the biggest culprit.
yes, in filling up the lakes, for sure.
Kempanbundi and Koramangala.
Absolutely.
I think very beautiful vision and way forward. I think that's great. How should IIM, communities and citizens get involved?
IIM is a public policy think tank. Their words count like gold in governance circles. People are waiting to listen to them, and if they frame the policy with the social goals in perspective, then all citizens will rise up and welcome the IIM and its public policy thinking and get the governance clear. So in the sense, we have to build narratives. We have to build streams of thought and goals that we need to set ourselves. One of the most difficult problems confronting our societies is the problems are so wickedly complex and so myriad that we end up in just protracted navel gazing. We're putting band-aid on chickenpox. So we need to get an overall goal for ourselves as a society, as institutions, create those policies which will drive ourselves to that goal, and that goal is universal access, and keep measuring ourselves and saying this is the path that we go to, with better behavior from communities and citizens along the way. Vote for me in the next election. So.
Wonderful lecture. I think it was both relevant to the context in which what say was given, but I think it's also relevant to IMB, to the central spending policy, and also sort of reimagines the problems in virtually everyone's minds in terms of what is water, why is water, how we use water, and when is it a good conversation around water, when it is a challenging conversation on water. So I mean, even with the sidelines, some couscous is happening all over the room. So I think thanks a lot for these kinds of conversations. Very grateful for you for finding time and coming here and sharing your thoughts on this. And yeah, we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. It's such a pleasure. And thank you for having me.
Oh, we'll go pictures with the family and also.
Now I'd like to invite Professor one more document appreciation for you, sir.
Now I would like to invite the family members. Is that?
So I think let's just do it outside because there'll be more space. So we'll just step outside and there's a banner at the top, so we'll sort of gather around that for the yeah, whoever is there, yeah. Will that be possible? One in the class. Right? So guys, can we just stay for a second longer? We'll do it in the class because I think this open space is not available anywhere else to do it. Yeah. So please be seated. Please be seated. Quickly take a picture. And... Oh. Okay. Please, if you can sit in the front rows and stand in the back rows. Yeah, I think that will sort of this front row. We need a place for Vishwanath to sort of occupy. Maybe you can stand in the middle. Yeah, that second row, please stand because everything there.
First two rows can sit down.
Next to it. Yeah, please stand. Yeah, if everyone's standing, everyone's moving closer, so. Yeah.
You want us to start?
That's right.
Thank you. Interesting.